Let's get this out of the way before the comments section hyperventilates. If by English skill you mean sounding like a BBC radio host gently narrating a countryside murder, then no, most Singaporeans don't qualify. Tragic. Truly. Somewhere, a monocle just fell into a cup of tea. But if by English skill you mean the ability to close deals, move capital, negotiate salaries, structure investments, flip property, read financial contracts, and not accidentally bankrupt yourself, then this conversation suddenly gets very awkward for native speakers. Because Singaporeans don't speak English to express themselves. They speak English to extract value. That difference matters. Native English speakers love to romanticize language. Accents, idioms, humour, vibes. Singaporeans treat English like a financial instrument, a tool, a weapon, a spreadsheet with verbs. Singlish isn't bad English. It's compressed English, optimised for speed, hierarchy, and efficiency. Why waste 12 emotional sentences when 3 words and a raised eyebrow will do? Meanwhile, many so-called native speakers are busy perfecting sarcasm while signing employment contracts they didn't fully read. Grammar. Flawless. Net worth. Mysterious. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Singapore's English system was never designed to create poets. It was designed to create administrators, traders, fund managers, compliance officers, bankers, and property investors. And it shows. Singaporeans might not debate Shakespeare for fun, but they can discuss interest rate differentials, explain capital inflows, argue over REIT yields, navigate cross-border taxation, negotiate real estate leverage all in English without blinking. This isn't linguistic inferiority, this is market adaptation. Native English countries export culture, Singapore imports capital. Guess which one pays better? And before anyone says, but the accent, remember this brutal rule of global finance. Money does not care how you sound. It only cares if you understand the terms. Singaporeans understand the terms. Stocks, bonds, property, funds, trusts. English is just the operating system. If this already annoys you, congratulations. That means the algorithm is warming up. Smash. Like so, this video escapes polite mediocrity. Subscribe if you enjoy watching comfortable myths get repossessed. Next chapter continues whether feelings survive or not. Here's where native English speakers usually get defensive, because this part stings a little and hits the wallet directly. Native fluency is about sounding natural. Financial fluency is about surviving reality. They are not the same skill. Pretending otherwise is how people end up fluent, broke, and confused. Native speakers grow up swimming in English. That comfort creates a dangerous illusion. If I speak it well, I must understand it well. No. You understand conversation, not contracts. Singaporeans learn English the hard way. In school, in exams, in bureaucracy, in corporate hierarchies where misunderstanding one clause can cost your job, visa, or bonus. That pressure produces something native speakers rarely develop: precision under consequence. Let's talk finance, since advertisers love it and reality demands it. When a Singaporean discusses mortgage lock-in periods, floating versus fixed interest rates, REIT dividend sustainability, currency exposure, capital gains tax arbitrage, cross-border income structuring, they are not expressing opinions. They are making decisions with irreversible outcomes. Native speakers, especially from comfortable economies, often use English to debate, critique, or perform intelligence. Singaporeans use English to calculate risk. That's why in global banks, hedge funds, asset management firms, and real estate investment circles, Singaporeans don't sound poetic. They sound annoyingly clear. No filler, no emotional padding, no linguistic decoration. Just, what's the yield? What's the downside? Who absorbs the loss? When do we exit? This is also why Singlish exists. Singlish isn't linguistic laziness. It's transactional compression. Why say, I respectfully disagree with your assessment of the projected downside risks, and I propose an alternative viewpoint. When, cannot, risk too high. Next option. Does the job faster and safer? Time is money. Singlish saves both. Native English speakers often dominate media, academia, cultural commentary. Opinion columns, Singaporeans dominate. Regional finance, logistics coordination, property capital flows, wealth management pipelines. Different objectives, different outcomes. One produces applause, the other produces assets. And here's the part people hate admitting. Many native speakers only sound confident because the system cushions their mistakes. Singaporeans don't get that luxury. Mess up your English in Singapore? You lose credibility, you lose opportunity, you lose money. So they don't. If this chapter made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is where algorithms and bank balances both grow. Hit like to keep this visible. Subscribe if you prefer reality over accent worship. Native English countries have a dirty little secret. They stopped teaching English seriously the moment they realized they already spoke it. Once a language becomes invisible, discipline disappears. Grammar turns into vibes. Precision turns into confidence. Confidence turns into catastrophic misunderstandings buried inside legally binding documents. Singapore never had that luxury. English in Singapore was never a birthright. It was an infrastructure project. From day one, English was treated like math or accounting, something you must master, or the system will crush you quietly and move on. Schools didn't ask, "How do you feel about this text?" They asked, "Can you understand instructions, summarize arguments, write clearly, and not embarrass the institution?" That mindset produces a very specific type of English user. Functional, structured, ruthlessly practical Singaporean students learn English to pass standardized exams, navigate bureaucracy, write reports, survive corporate environments, compete internationally. Native English students learn English to express opinions, explore identity, debate feelings, analyze themes, argue about symbolism, lovely skills, low ROI. This difference shows up brutally in finance and real estate. Put a Singaporean and a native English speaker in front of a 40-page mortgage agreement, a prospectus for a REIT, a private placement memo, a cross-border tax document, a shareholder agreement. One reads it like a risk map. The other skims and hopes vibes will carry them. Singapore's English education emphasizes reading for liability, writing for accountability, speaking for hierarchy, listening for instructions. Native systems emphasize creativity, interpretation, expression. Again, different goals, different outcomes. That's why Singapore keeps exporting. Bankers, analysts, compliance officers, risk managers, operations executives. While native English countries export commentators, consultants, think pieces, podcasts, explaining why money feels stressful. And no, this isn't about intelligence, it's about training under pressure. In Singapore, English failure has consequences. Lower academic streams, reduced career options, weaker income trajectories, limited access to capital-heavy industries. So the system enforces discipline. In native countries, English failure is often cushioned by social mobility myths, cultural confidence debt, and the assumption that "I'll figure it out later." Later arrives with interest. This is why Singaporeans may not sound elegant, but they sound employable. They don't charm rooms, they run processes, and processes are where money lives. If this chapter is clicking, help the algorithm notice. Hit like, subscribe if you prefer systems over sentiment. Corporations are polite liars. They'll tell you they value diversity, communication, and cultural fit. What they actually value is not getting sued, fined, audited, or accidentally vaporized by a badly worded email. This is where Singaporean English quietly wins while native speakers are busy admiring their own tone. Multinational corporations don't need English that sounds beautiful. They need English that is unambiguous, documentable, defensible in court, safe for compliance, predictable across borders. Singaporean English delivers exactly that. Let's talk about the corporate nightmare scenario. A native speaker writes an email. "I think this should be fine. Let's move forward and see how it goes." Looks friendly. Sounds confident. Legally, a disaster. A Singaporean writes, "Proceed subject to compliance clearance. Risk noted. No guarantee implied." Cold, unfriendly, emotionless. Legally, a fortress. Guess which one legal departments prefer? This is why Singapore has become a regional hub for global banks, asset management firms, commodity traders, logistics giants, real estate investment vehicles, family offices, private equity operations. These industries don't reward charisma. They reward precision under liability. Singaporean English is shaped by regulation-heavy environments, government oversight, audit culture, risk committees, compliance reviews. Every sentence is written with the ghost of a lawyer watching. Native English environments often reward confidence, persuasiveness, verbal agility, narrative framing. Again, nice traits. Dangerous in finance. This is why Singaporeans dominate regional roles involving contract management, operations control, risk assessment, treasury functions, compliance and governance. They don't sell the vision, they prevent the collapse. And corporations remember that. Here's the part no one admits publicly. Many native English speakers get hired for front-facing roles, client charm, branding, storytelling. Singaporeans get trusted with the money, the contracts, the property assets, the fund structures, the operational backbone. One group talks about growth, the other controls the mechanisms that make growth real. This also explains why Singaporean English sounds flat. Flat English is safe English. Safe English survives audits, and audits decide bonuses. If this chapter is hitting too close to home, good. That's usually where retention improves. Hit like, so this doesn't die quietly in politeness. Subscribe if you prefer knowing how power actually works. Short answer, no. Long answer, they're worse at the kind of English that doesn't matter, and better at the kind that does. Native English speakers win at sounding natural humour, storytelling idioms, casual conversation, cultural performance. Singaporeans win at contracts, finance, compliance, risk, property transactions, cross-border money movement, institutional survival. If English were a beauty contest, natives would take the crown. If English were a tool for building wealth, avoiding disaster, and staying employed in brutal systems, Singaporeans would quietly lock the door and keep the keys. This is why the question itself is flawed. Who speaks better English is a tourist question. The real question is, who uses English to gain leverage? Singaporean English evolved inside a small country with no natural resources, a hyper-competitive global market, high housing prices, aggressive wealth stratification, constant exposure to global capital flows. Under those conditions, language becomes survival tech. That's why Singlish exists. That's why sentences are short. That's why tone is flat. That's why ambiguity is avoided. That's why politeness is optional. This is not cultural laziness. This is economic adaptation. Native English countries could afford to let language drift into personality and performance because their systems absorbed the damage. Singapore never could. Make one mistake in a mortgage clause, a rate prospectus, a fund agreement, a property transaction, a compliance report, and the consequences are immediate, expensive, and permanent. So Singaporeans learned English like engineers, not artists. And here's the uncomfortable final truth. Many native speakers mock Singaporean English right up until they apply for a job there, they try to buy property there, they negotiate salary there, they read a contract there, they lose money there. At that point, Accents stop mattering, understanding starts mattering. So, no, Singaporeans aren't bad at English. They're just not performing it for your comfort. They're using it to survive markets that don't care about feelings. If this series sharpened your view of how language, money, and power actually interact, don't let it die quietly. Hit like so this reaches people who still think accents equal intelligence. Subscribe if you want more content about finance, property, capital flows, and the systems quietly running your life.